So, martial arts. We kick, we use knees and elbows, and of course we punch. Given that that punching is bare knuckle without any protection, should we be working on conditioning the fists? From the Systema perspective, the answer is yes and no. Before we get into that, I'd just like to remind you, if you click the join button below, you can find out all the information you need on how to access our new membership channel. We're uploading a lot of great content there, instructional content on groundwork, on striking. We're going to be starting some work on short sticks soon as well. So just click the join button and that will give you all the information you need. In traditional Eastern martial arts, it's very common to see this idea of conditioning. A lot of karate styles use things like a makawara, for example, to toughen the hands. That can go to extremes. I heard of a group who went to train in South Korea, and one of the first things they had to do was punch the wall continuously as hard as they can until their knuckles were raw and bleeding. Not something I'd advise. After training in judo and boxing, I spent a lot of time in Chinese martial arts, and there was a full range of conditioning work there as well. So that would include things like conditioning the hands by doing types of striking work, with what was called arm locking, banging the limbs together, conditioning shins using sort of bamboo rods to hit, and various types of internal practice, what was called iron shirt. So that would vary from quite simple methods of simply tightening the core to very involved and intricate methods involving breathing and certain stances and that kind of thing. So this was all working fine. When we did demos, we used to do sort of breaking stuff, you know, the old sort of traditional way, or having things broken on us. We'd invite people up from the audience to give punches, that kind of stuff. But the training was very time consuming, and I also found that when I did get into a situation once, I actually broke a couple of knuckles through hitting someone. And I also found, of course, when I came to the Systema teachers, none of my punches did anything to them, and in stark contrast, when they hit me, it just tore straight through all that iron shirt stuff. And these guys weren't doing any of that kind of training. So in that sense, Systema doesn't have this idea of conditioning, this idea of toughening the skin, of toughening the bones, because of course one thing Systema is very much about is the health of the practitioner as well, and some of those practices can be injurious to the body. They can cause problems. Now, to be fair, the stuff I was doing in the Chinese styles was accompanied by a lot of things like massage and qigong work, and also applying various liniments, dit da jiao, medicines, that kind of thing. So there was an eye to health as well. But as I said, the training was very lengthy, and it still didn't stop these other things happening. In fact, when I was training at that time, my knuckles were really prominent. People used to remark about it quite a lot, and people used to say, aren't you worried you're going to get arthritis or that kind of thing? Well, again, if you do that kind of stuff properly, that's not an issue. I mean, I'm also a musician, right? I play keyboards. I'm not going to do anything that's going to damage my hands. But luckily I found with the Systema method, there's no need for all of that stuff, at least in my experience. So, how do we approach this from the Systema perspective? So I would say the Systema approach is not really about toughening the skin or deforming the bones in any way. It's really about strengthening and reinforcing and refining the structure of our punch. The power that's generated in Systema punching has quite a different feel from what I'd experienced before, and that really comes through this idea of movement, of delivering power rather than tension in a strike. I think in some ways you can liken this to the way a sword is made, right? You can pick up anything and club someone with it. You know, a big lump of wood with something on the end will do the job. A sword is tempered, the blade is refined over a long process, and of course it needs to be strong, it needs to be sharp, but it also needs to have flexibility and give, otherwise the blade is just going to snap. And in many ways, the Systema punching method can be very much like using the sword. I think there's a lot of crossover between the two. So, how do we achieve this? How do we work on this structure? How do we work on strengthening the structure? Well, of course, the answer is press-ups. Now, people think, right, press-ups, I put my hands on the floor, you blast out 50 press-ups. That's okay, you know, you want to build the shoulders up, that's fine. But press-ups for striking, it's a slightly different approach, and we need to dig in a little and look at some of the finer details. So let's just look at that basic press up position. I'm starting on my knees and the hands are coming out pretty much in line with the knees. So they should be under the shoulders. They're not coming out too wide. I basically want a line coming straight up the arm and into the body, into the shoulders, rather than out here. So line up with the knees and make the fist. Now you can make the fist in a couple of ways. Some people say you can curl the little finger and the first finger in and then close that way, or others it's like you're holding an egg or something quite fragile. Basically you don't want to have too much tension in the fist at this stage. You want to keep it fairly relaxed, but of course we need to have some sort of tension or structural integrity in the wrist, because if the hands completely relax then they collapse. So get used to this position first. You can start shuffling the knees back, getting some weight on the fists, and it should start to feel comfortable, like you're resting on the bones. It should take no effort at all. Just that amount of tension in the fist and the wrist to maintain the structure. And the other thing we want to look at is you're trying to get as much contact with the floor and the fist as you can. So if I'm this way, then there's a gap here. If I'm this way, there's a gap here. I'm trying to get as much contact as I can, because later on when we punch, that's what we're looking for, to get as much contact as we can. So this is in contrast to some punching methods where they use this knuckle or this knuckle or these kind of things. We're looking to work the whole fist. So knees, line and rest. Now once I've got that idea, I can come back onto the toes. I can either put both feet out or I can put one foot on the other. And I'm going to take an inhale, and then I'm slowly going to exhale down, just relaxing the elbows. And I advise, first of all, you go all the way to the floor. Let the whole body weight rest on the floor. Take another inhale. And now exhale. Slowly up again. Maintaining that contact with the ground with as much of the knuckle as I can. Again, I don't want the wrist to be distorting. Don't think about so much pushing yourself up, but imagine you're pushing the floor away, because what I want to do is keep the shoulders relaxed. So I inhale and exhale here. I'm not letting any of that tension come up into the shoulders. So you can go down and rest, or you can just go continuous, and you can inhale or exhale down and vice versa up. It doesn't matter, as long as you're doing one or the other, because the breathing is helping to reinforce our internal structure, physically and psychologically. Now of course you can try a couple of things from here. You can try maintaining this position for a period of time. You can also try the slow press up. This is very good for pinpointing weaknesses in your structure. So you go down just an inch or so at a time. And where you feel a weak spot, then perhaps you'll rest on that for a little and then continue all the way down and all the way up, keeping the shoulders relaxed. So just to stress again, we want to keep maximum contact with the ground. We want to maintain the structure of the wrist, but we don't want to let any of that tension creep up into the arm and the shoulder. This means the shoulder maintains a freedom of movement. That's what allows us to deliver the strike. If we've got that tension up in the shoulder, then it inhibits our movement. It becomes difficult to deliver a good punch. Now of course, once you've started developing your structure and your movement and everything else, you need to start testing it to make sure that it's correct. So there's a few good ways to do this. One is using a partner. You can place the fist and push, and of course you build that up to your striking work. Now I did see on YouTube recently a self-defense expert quite boldly proclaim that you shouldn't hit each other in training because it's too dangerous. Well, if you don't know what you're doing, it is, but if you've got a structured, measured approach, then it's perfectly fine. and not hitting each other during training. To me, that's a little bit like learning to play the piano while the lid is down, right? Now, if you don't have a partner, you can, maybe use a heavy bag or something like that. But one thing I've found is very good for solo practice is just to use a wall and a focus pad. So I'm just going to place the focus pad on the wall, and I'm hitting. Now, I'm not hitting with any power, I'm really just hitting with movement, just this movement. And what I'm doing here first of all is just checking that structure again, exactly the same as I'm doing in the press up. Now, obviously the angle you can hit at will vary and everything else, but just from that starting point of view, we're just doing that straight, quite short movement. So it's this idea again of I've got to keep the hand sort of tense just enough to support the structure. I don't want to be over tensing. If that tension creeps up into the arm, then I feel that jarring. Even at that level, that's jarring all the way up into the shoulder. We want to be getting all the power out into the object we're hitting. So the fist is just tense enough. I keep the shoulder relaxed, I keep the arm relaxed, maintaining that structure, and I just start hitting. Now, of course, I can increase the power on that if I want to, start working harder. But I'm still looking to make sure as much power as possible is going into the pad and not back up into me. So if I'm rocking myself back all the time, then that's wrong. Now, once you've spent some time on that with the pad and you can start getting that decent hit out and everything's working fine, then you can work against the bare wall. Now, this is not conditioning. I just want to stress, I'm not saying you have to hit the wall for 10 minutes a day to toughen the skin and toughen your knuckles. It's not that at all. It's just a way to test our delivery system, to test our structure. So again, I just start quite light. And the idea is like the press up again. I'm trying to make maximum contact with the fist against the wall. If I'm sort of doing this, I'm just hitting with 2 knuckles or 1 knuckle, or the wrist is bent in some way, again, that's wrong. It's going to hurt. If I develop this way, I can put in a fairly decent hit onto the wall and there's no issues. Work this on your own, but it's also interesting to work this with a partner, whether you're doing the pad or the wall. Once you've got that feeling on the wall, then go and hit your partner. Hit them in the safe place as we do, and you start to feel how to deliver power, not through this tension, but simply by the movement and the structure and that controlled tension in the fist. Of course, giving hits, taking hits, that's another whole big area in itself. But I think if you start practicing this way, you'll notice a difference in your hits. Because the hits are not delivered with tension, that's what gives them that sort of penetration, if you like. That's what allows you to start working in through the skin, through the muscle, and working deep into the system below. And of course, that type of exercise is a win-win, because one person is learning to deliver strikes, the other person is learning to deal with them and how to manage impact and the physical and psychological stress that comes with it. So there's a couple of ideas for how we condition the hands in Systema. Again, I just want to emphasize, it's not about toughening the skin or deforming the knuckles and breaking bones and resetting them or anything like that. It's all down to the structure, the movement, and how you organize yourself to deliver, and also of course later on to take the strikes as well. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know below. Do please share and subscribe, and just a reminder again to click the join button to get access to all our new instructional content that's going up on the members channel.